Hi guys, welcome to another prototype video, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to use real data inside of your prototypes. So we're probably all very familiar with creating dummy content for our designs, so whether we're prototyping in Protopie or indeed if we're designing inside of Figma. But I'm here to tell you that that is now a thing of the past if you're prototyping in Protopie, because Protopie has got quite a few features now that gives us the ability to bring real data into our prototypes. So in this video, we're going to be looking specifically at a function called parseJSON. And JSON is a particular data format that developers use to bring data into our app experiences and our web experiences. And it's not that hard to get your head around. It's pretty simple. And I'm going to show you everything you need to know in this video to start using it inside of your prototypes. So if that's interesting to you, if you're ready to kind of start bringing real data into your prototypes, then stick around and I'll show you how to do it. Okay, so let's start by looking at our content in its final form in the interface. We're going to populate this hero component here, and you might see this in a typical streaming app. So we've got three elements that we're going to use. We've got the image, we've got the title of the movie or show, and we've got a little summary, a little synopsis that we want to bring in. So these are the three kind of pieces of information we want to bring in. So let's just kind of have a look at how that would look like in JSON. Okay, so I'm just going to use Protopie here, just a text field, just to kind of like type this out to take you through it. Okay, so we've got our title. That's going to be one element. We've got our summary, and we've got our image. Okay, so these are three elements that we'll need data for. Okay, so what's that going to look like in JSON? So let's kind of break that down. Okay, so the first thing we need to do when we write JSON is we need to start with some square brackets. So I'm just going to lay those down. And the kind of entirety of JSON is kind of wrapped in these square brackets, and these square brackets represent something called an array. And an array is something that will be in programming. You may or may not have any experience in programming. I don't want you to worry too much about it. Just for those that you know programming, this is going to be an array of objects. For those of you that don't know programming, just know that we need to kind of wrap all of our data in these square brackets. Okay, so we have one at the beginning and we have one at the end. And inside of this, we're going to use another kind of bracket, okay? So we're going to use these curly braces. So we're going to put one of those down, and we're actually going to put one at the end as well. So again, we need to wrap our data inside of these curly braces, inside of our square brackets, okay? And the first thing we're going to type is the kind of identifiers. So title, summary, and image. These are going to be the things that we're going to be using to reference the actual data inside the JSON string. Okay. So the first thing we're going to put down is title, and we need to wrap that in some double quotes like this. So that's our first part. Now we call this the name. Okay. And actually, when you look at this whole JSON string, we're using something called name value pairs. And all that really means is everything we kind of type in is going to have a name and it's going to have a value. And our value is going to be our text. And it's the name that we're going to be using to reference these things. Okay, so we've written our name. We now need to put in a colon. And then we need to write our value. So that also is wrapped in double quotes. And this is going to be the title of our first show or movie. So I'm just making up some fake content here. So we're going to have a movie called Jedi Knight. We really need a movie called Jedi Knight. And that's inside of our double quotes. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is we need to type a comma, because we want to put the next piece of information. And the next piece of information is going to be the summary. And from here on in, everything is going to follow the same format. So I could literally just copy this name value pair, and we can paste it in. I'm actually just going to change the content here. So I'm just going to grab the content. Actually got some here. I'm just going to change this. I'm going to paste that content in here. And we're actually wanting to change the name to summary. Okay, so we've actually got our second piece of information here. We can actually just kind of format this out just so it's a bit easier to read. Okay, so we've got our title, name value pair, and now we've got our summary name value pair. And then finally, we've got our image, which again, we just need to put a comma to separate these out. And for the image, it's going to be the same thing. So we're just going to, we can type this one just for some practice. So image, I'm actually going to call this image URL. You can call it really whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. And we're going to put our double quotes here. So inside these double quotes is going to be your URL path. And to do the image URL thing, you need to have an image that is available on the internet. So what I did is I literally uploaded the images I created into my Google Photos on one of my Google accounts, upload it to Google Photos. That then puts it up on the internet, gives you a public URL, and I just copied that public URL out and I pasted it inside of here. But as you can imagine, it'll be something along the lines of something like this: www.mysite.com/image.jpg. Something like that. So it's going to be a URL that you're going to paste inside of here. Okay. And that's essentially our first object. Okay. So this is called an object, the thing between the curly braces. And this represents one line of data, one element inside of our carousel. As you can imagine, this could be a list of data. It could be any other kind of data that you've got inside of your app experience. Now, we want to have multiple rows or multiple elements. Obviously, we've got a few carousel items. We're actually going to have 3. So all I need to do now is I just need to copy this. So this also needs to have a comma. Let me just open that box up. Between objects. So I need to put a comma here. And now I can start my new object, and I can literally just copy this and paste that in, and then this can be my next movie. So whatever that needs to be, okay? So every time you put in a new object, just put a comma after, and then you put your next object, okay? And that is literally it. This is JSON. It's not that scary. Once you get used to formatting it, it's no different to any other kind of text formatting. Okay, so now we've had the JSON primer and you totally understand how JSON works. We're going to get into the prototype and I'm going to show you how we can use it and connect it to this hero carousel. Okay, so I've got my starter.py file open here. And I just want to draw your attention to the components. So we've got 2 components. We've got a hero item component and we've got a hero carousel component. And these are the 2 components that make up this hero carousel that's sitting on the top of our fake video streaming app that we've got here. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the hero item component. And there's 3 layers I want to draw your attention to. So we've got a title layer. So this is obviously where we're going to put the movie title in. We've got a summary layer, which is where the summary is going to go. And both of these are native ProPy text layers. And then finally, we've got an image layer, which is where we're going to use the new image URL feature, which is part of ProtoPy Enterprise. Okay, so let's get cracking. The first thing we want to do is we want to add a text variable inside of this component. So I'm just going to open up my variables panel. I'm going to add a new variable and I'm going to call this data. I will just need to turn this into a text variable here. And I want to actually add another variable here as well. This is going to be a numeric variable and we're going to call this item. And I'll explain what this is for in a second. Okay, finally on this item, we want to make that overrideable. Okay, so the data variable will be the holder of the JSON, and from this we'll be able to extract the data we need for each hero instance. So inside the carousel, as you'll see, we've got 3 instances of the hero component. And as I mentioned before, in the primer for JSON, JSON is essentially an array of objects, and arrays actually have some other special features. And we're going to take advantage of one of those special features, which is the ability to reference any row in the array. So one thing to know about arrays is they're zero based, which means the first item starts at 0. So it's 0, 1, 2, 3 rather than 1, 2, 3. And that's what our item variable is going to be used for. We're going to use that to reference each item, each object in our array, and make sure we get the right data into each of the 3 instances. Okay, so next up, we're going to stay inside of our hero item component. We're going to add a receive trigger. And we're going to leave the channel as receive from current scene. And we're going to type a message, and we're going to call that hero data. You can call it whatever you want. I'm just going to use camel case here. And we want to assign the hero data to a variable, and we want to assign it to our data variable that we created just previously. Okay, so because the hero component is a nested component, we'll be passing the JSON down the component hierarchy from the parent. But we'll get to that next. Okay, next up, we're going to add a detect trigger. And we're going to detect that data variable. So we're going to detect when data is actually being received. And inside of the detect trigger, we're going to add a text response. We're going to name this title. So this first text response is going to populate the title layer. And we're going to choose the title layer here in the dropdown. Okay, we want to populate this dynamically, so we're going to change content from text to formula. And we're going to open up the formula window. And we're looking for the parse JSON function. So let's start typing. So literally type PA or get parse JSON. That's the one we want. Inside of this, we need to add the data variable. And then we're going to type a comma, and we're going to add the item variable. Next up, we're going to add a plus, and we're going to open up our double quotes, and we're going to type dot title. And we actually want to make sure we don't get these backslashes. That's something that Protopie puts in because it thinks you're referencing the layer name, and that's not something we want to do. We're actually referencing the title node inside of the JSON. Okay, so that's what our whole formula should look like. So parse JSON, and we're grabbing the data. So that's the JSON data. We're also grabbing the item number. So remember, this item variable is going to hold 0, 1, or 2. Because we've only got 3 items in our JSON, and that's going to be referencing the specific row of the data that we want to reference. And then we're going to look for the title element. Remember when we went through the primer, JSON is basically objects which have name value pairs, and we're looking for the name. So we use the dot title as the name we're looking for, and that's going to grab the title data for us. Okay. So that's all we need to do in here. I'm just going to copy this. Might be useful for later. And I'm going to click OK. Okay, so next up, we're going to duplicate this text response because we've obviously got this summary as well. So we can just reuse this for summary. I'm just going to change the name to summary. And we need to target the summary layer. And we just need to make a little change inside of our formula. So instead of referencing .title, we want to reference .summary. That's the name of our summary name in our JSON. And we're going to click OK. And finally, we need to populate the image layer with our image URL. So we're going to add a media response. And we're going to choose our image layer. And in the source here, we're going to switch this from image to formula. And inside of here, we're going to put pretty much the same formula that we did before. So remember, I copied that. So I'm just going to paste this in, if it'll let me. Okay, so all the front bit is the same. Again, we just need to change the final bit. And inside of our JSON, I've actually got a name called image URL. Okay, so .image URL. And we just need to make sure, we can see we've got a little error here. We need to make sure we've got both double quotes. So that's wrapped in both double quotes here. That's correct. Okay. Okay, so we're going to click OK there. Okay, so as you can imagine, it'll be a bit of a waste of time having to add all this JSON to each instance, especially after doing all the work we've done. So instead, we're going to enable the ability to add the JSON in the parent hero carousel. So we're done effectively inside the hero item component. We're going to jump into the hero carousel component. And inside of here, we're going to add a variable. We're going to call this data again. Remember, it's all the same data we're kind of like reusing around. So we're just going to call it the same thing. And we're going to make this overridable. You don't necessarily need to make it overridable. It's really if you want to add the JSON data inside of the root of the carousel. So which is what we're going to be doing. Okay, but you could actually add it directly into this variable here. We also need to make sure this is a text variable because obviously we're passing JSON into it. Okay, next up we're going to add a start trigger, and we're going to choose start with jump, and that just basically makes sure that the start trigger triggers just before the actual component is rendered. And inside of this, we're going to add a send response. And we're going to leave it as send to current scene. And the message we're going to send is that message we populated earlier, hero data. Okay, and we're going to check send value together. And we're going to grab the data variable because that's going to have our JSON in it. Okay, so that's basically what's going to happen is when the prototype runs, the start trigger is going to trigger. It's going to grab our JSON, which we're going to be pasting outside in the scene. It's going to grab our JSON from that data variable, and it's going to send it back to the scene. And that's going to be picked up by our hero item instances, and then it's going to populate all three things. One more thing we have to do inside of here. Remember, we've got this array row thing going on. So we've got array 0, 1, 2. So we need to just make sure that each instance of our carousel has got the right number associated with it. So when you create instances, they're gonna kind of instantly they're going to by default have 0 for each one. You can see each item's got 0. So we just need to change this. So hero square 1 is indeed can stay as 0 because remember arrays are 0 based. We're going to change the second one to the number 1 and the third one to number 2. Okay, cool. Okay, so let's come back to our scene. We're kind of done inside of the components. And if we just come to the scene here. Okay, so if we come back to this content layer and we find the instance of our hero carousel, we're just going to select that. You can see we've got this data override, but it's got nothing in it. So I'm just going to go and grab my JSON data. I'm going to copy that, and I'm just going to paste that directly in here. Okay, so that's my JSON data pasted in. This should hopefully all work now. Let's open up preview. And as you can see, we've now got an image and we've got a title and we've got a summary for our hero item. And if I scroll across, you can see we've got the Ghostbusters one and then we've got this Jedi Knight one. So now this is all being dynamically populated from our JSON, and we didn't need to bring in any images from Figma. We didn't need to type all this text. We didn't need to do any of that. We can just kind of grab that directly from that JSON. Now, obviously, as I said before, the text is inside the JSON data. So if you was to run this offline, then you would get the JSON data for the text elements, but you wouldn't get the image because that's being referenced from the web. So obviously this prototype does now require you to have an internet connection. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this video. Hopefully you've got a really good understanding of how you can add dynamic data to your prototypes. Now, if you're working in an organization, you can almost certainly get the JSON data from your development team. And if you're essentially prototyping ideas for a real product that you're working on, they're going to be having those images already available via the internet for you as well. It'll be in the JSON data. That's exactly how they're accessing them and getting them into your real app or website. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this tutorial looking into dynamic data. There's going to be some more tutorials around dynamic data coming very, very soon. I'm going to be showing you how to use the new API functionality within Protopie Connect. And if you don't know what Protopie Connect is, it's a server-based solution which allows you to take your prototypes to like an unprecedented level of realism. You can connect to hardware. You can use essentially a protocol tool called Socket.io. You can create custom plugins. You can do like a whole bunch of stuff. It's just a whole nother world. And it's a world we're going to be getting into on this channel. So if you're interested in that and you're interested in the videos I've been putting out, make sure you subscribe so you get notified when those tutorials drop. And if you also want the starter files that I use within this video, then you're going to need to head over to my Patreon channel. That's where all of the starters and the completed files are there. And there's a whole bunch of tutorials over there as well. Literally hundreds of tutorials now, including all of my courses I've ever done as well. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there and hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.